Hi viewers and welcome to the channel, and today I'm looking at the Curves Workbench and also the Mesh Workbench. So we're going to import an STL file, and what I want to do is capture the edges of this STL file. So this top and the bottom. So this is a knife handle and I want to make a much smoother representation of this handle. So we're going to take basically the essence of this and convert it to something like this. Now this is created using the Curves Workbench. And also it's now a solid, so I can use this throughout the part and part design workbench to further enhance that model. We're going to be looking at the techniques that I use to do this, and that includes the blend surface, mirroring and positioning the mirror of a sweep across two rails. Also we're going to be looking at importing STL files and how I got the actual edge from that STL file. It's a very simple technique of what to use, but we're looking at decimating meshes in there as well. A little bit around STL. We're not going to go too deep into STL, that's going to be for another video. But we're just going to show you this technique, and in future videos I'm going to take this even further and look at other ways to close this as a solid. So one of the problems that you may encounter with the Curves Workbench is actually getting your object into a solid form. But in future videos we're going to be going further into that and giving you a number of techniques to get a solid out of your Curves Workbench model. So I hope you're enjoying the channel, and let's have a look how we do this. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. In this video I'll be taking inspiration from an existing model and using some of those edges in there to actually create the handle. I've placed the attribution card up on screen if you want to actually download and have a look at the original. This comes down as STL format, and the blade and the handle are two separate models. So first of all I'm going to come over to FreeCAD. I've created a new document already, and I'm going to be using something called the Mesh Design Workbench, which already comes packaged with FreeCAD. I'm going to go File, Import, and I'm going to import the STL model. And there's a number of files here, and this one will be the actual handle. As you can see, we've got two parts, but they appear as one single object. These two are called components. So when you have a number of components in an STL file, they are separate bodies, and you can actually separate those out. To do that, we're going to go up to Meshes, come down to Split by Components, and both the components will be separated. We can get rid of the original file now, or the original mesh, and we have the separate components here. Because they're mirrored, I'm going to just delete one of the components and work on one side. Now there's only one or two things that I want to take from this model, and that's this edge here. I like the design of this edge, and I can change it into the trigger design that I want to achieve. So how do I get the edges of the STL file? As you can see, I can't select the edges. Now there are other workbenches that you can use to break up an STL. What I'm going to show you is quite a simple method of just extracting out this outer edge so you can use it. I'm going to click on the component, and I'm going to be using the cross sections, also available from Meshes, cutting and cross sections. This is very similar to the part cross sections. You can see we've got an orange box surrounding the object. On the left hand side here you can see our cross section guiding plane, sections and options. At the moment the cross section has gone through the right plane. If I want to change it, I can change it via these. So you can see those are changing planes there. Now I want to get as low as possible to this bottom edge. To do that, I'm going to come into the position, and I'm just going to set this to 0.1. So it's just off the bottom. If I set this to 0, and hit OK, our loop is added, but you can see we've got a number of edges that appear here. So this is not what we want. If I press the spacebar on the actual component and hide it, you can see what we've got. So let's get rid of that component, bring back the original, and do that looping again. And I'm going to set this to 0.1 and hit OK. That now has taken that edge. If I click on the component and press the spacebar, we can see that edge has taken. Now if we roll over these edges, you can see that it's made up of a number of small edges. If this was quite a big model, I would actually use the component, come up to meshes, and use the decimation to reduce those edges. From here we can reduce the edges. What I'll do is just do this once so you can see the effect. You can see I've gone too far and it's reduced down to something that we can't really use. All the definition has gone. So I've gone too far with that one. Just going to hit Ctrl Z. Try that again. And we're going to just go something like 59% and hit OK. See, there's not much difference there, but you can see some reduction in the quality of the model. That means if I take that component and run another loop around it using the cross section, 0.1, and hit OK, hide that component now. Now I've got two loops, and you can see how they differ. So the bottom one is much more simplistic than this one here, the top one. And if I hide the top one, you can see that these edges will be larger in size compared to the original. So for instance, let's take one of these edges and bring back the original. You can see the difference in size. Let's go with the one we've just created from the decimate mesh. I'm going to hide the original component. We probably won't need that anymore. And what we have is a wire and a wire inside. So this is actually a compound object because we've got two separate lots of wires inside. We've got a closed wire around the outside and a closed wire inside. If we come into the part workbench, we can deal with compounds in the part workbench. So I'm going to come up to part, come down to compound, and explode the compound. So if it's just exploded that cross section, if we look in here, you can see in the component, there's component CS001, which is the original cross section. And now we have the outer and inner part. I don't need the inner part, so I'm going to get rid of that. So now we have our part exploded. But I still want to take one of these edges, have it in a separate rail, and have the other one as the other rail for our approximate curves on the surface created from a sweep along two rails in the curve workbench. So I have to section out these now. So now we've got our edges. I want to take rails from these. So I want to take this edge and use them in the curves workbench to make a sweep across two rails. For that, I need to remove some of these edges or isolate them in some way. Now there's a number of ways of doing this. You could come into the curves workbench and use the join curves and also the box element selection and highlight the ones that you want to select like so, and use the join curves. You can see we've got a bit of an issue there, that line there. Come down to false contact, set this to false, that will go away, but you must check. So if I come into this exploded component, press the spacebar, must check that this is all one line, which it isn't, as you can see here. If we've got this problem, what we can do is come in, use the control and use another join curves on there, like so, and hide the original. So making sure the vertices are at the end and there's the edge in the middle joining up those two. Let's bring the original component back. Let's see how we get hold of this edge using a different method. For that, I'm going to use the draft workbench. Come over to the draft workbench, and we're going to isolate this edge going along here. I'm just going to hide the join curve. I'm going to click on the component, come up to these tools here, or come up to modifications and go downgrade. That's downgraded that to a wire. You can see our join curve has broken because our wire has been created from that, and our original component has been downgraded but not a copy of it. So just look out for that. You may want to copy it before you do this, but now we've got a wire. We can downgrade that again. This time I'm going to use the toolbar and use a downgrade. What's happened? You've got a number of edges have appeared, and these are all individual edges. So you can see those all here. What we can do is use the edit box element selection and just highlight some. So I'm going to highlight these and hit delete, and do the same on the other side. Edit box element selection, and we're looking at this one here, hit delete, Shift D for box element selection again, and I'm going to delete this part here as well, and just hit delete on the keyboard. I'm looking at this edge here. I may want to get rid of that. There we go, that's gone. So now we've got two wires there, but they are individual edges. So what we need to do is come up to edit box element selection, highlight one side, modifications, and then upgrade. If we look down to see what's happened, that's upgraded that to a wire. We're going to do the same with this one. So we can use it from the toolbar and use the upgrade from here. First of all, edit box element selection or Shift E, and then upgrade that to a more complex object. So now we have two wires, but they are individual edges that run along there. I'm going to get rid of the two join curves, come over to the Curves Workbench, just going to save it, and I'm going to click on the wire and use the join curves tool. So I've joined that as one, click on the other wire and do the same. So now we've got the two wires there. So if it's easier for you to actually downgrade these, remove the tops and the bottoms and then upgrade them to separate wires, then do it that way. It's totally up to you. So you can see we've got this grid in here. That's to do with the draft workbench. So we can come into this padlock here and just turn the grid off and back over to the Curves Workbench. Now we have two join curves that we can use for our rails. If I bring back the original component, let's have a look. So you can see those curves are hugging that component. Now if we remember back to the original model, we had two halves, one on the other side. I don't want to do that with this. I want to make some separation because I want to create this as a chunkier handle. So now we have our component and the edges extracted out. We're going to create a curve across here to use something in the Curves Workbench called sweep across two rails. Now to do that and make our job a lot easier, I'm going to select both of these curves, which will be the rails. I'm going to come into view and I increase the point size because I need to get to these vertices. Once I've increased the point size, I can then place a curve across here using the freehand B-spline. There's a number of options in there that we'll get to in a minute that I'll be using. First of all, I'm just going to create a simple curve. Then click one, control click the other, and use the freehand B-spline tool. That places a line across there. I'm going to do the same on the other side, but first I need to come down and double click that freehand B-spline to take it out of edit mode. I'll do the same on the other side. So click the vertex, then control click the other vertex and use the freehand B-spline. So now we've got two freehand B-splines. I'm going to leave this one in edit mode. So we're going to click on it and press I, and that's placed a control point in there. If I bring this round to the front or the left, we can zoom in and I can affect this along this plane. I've got it selected left, so I can affect it along this plane. We could use the shortcuts there, X, Y, and Z, to constrain that axis. So for instance, click and hold, press Z, then that affects that axis. I've only clicked on Z, I haven't held it down, that just affects the axis going up and down. You can see left and right movement doesn't affect that. We can add more insertion points by clicking and hitting I, and we'll get another one there, and the same on this side. So we can change the curvature as we see fit. I'm going to leave that for the second and do the same on the other side. So come around to this one here. Make sure we double click to make sure it's in edit mode. Click, hit I, and then we have the insertion point. Click on the insertion point, click Z. You can see we've got a constraint that's come up, and we can move that up and down. And I'm just going to add a curve in there. And again, we can add more if we so desire. Notice I've just curved these. If we look at the edges of the curve and how they run, so if we extend the curve through that point, we can see that run smoothly through that point, which means that when we use this to make our sweep across two rails, by going over to the part, selecting both the arches, creating the ruled surface, coming back to the Curves Workbench, placing this so we can actually see this ruled surface, so we can select it, control select both the rails and use the sweep across two rails. And then finally clicking on the sweep across two rails and using the approximate points to n.u.r.b.s service. If we look at the edges, you can see how nice and clean they are. There's no overlap or bulging of the surface over these edges, and that's important for our next stage. We can see we've got a little bit here, but this is a decent surface that we can actually use. Let's have an experiment with the wires. So sweep across two rails, come down to the ruled surface, and inside there we have the freehand B-spline. Let's bring these into existence, which they are already, and let's have a look to see where they are. So we've got one on this side, and if I double click we can get to those. You can see how that curve is there, it curves right the way out. If we change this, let's click on right, come in and move this so it goes straight down like so, and same on the other side. And double click the freehand B-spline, you can see how the deformation has started to happen. We've got bulging of those surfaces coming out over that edge. If we look at the B-spline again, we can see how these are constructed. So we've got a shear fall off there. So I'll set that curve back to normal now. What I'm going to do is mirror this surface now. So I need the part workbench. We're going to create a mirror of this part. Bring it around and have a look. So I'm going to mirror across the y-axis, come into the mirroring, or come up to part, mirroring, XY plane, which is correct. Our approximation curve has been selected. If I hit OK, we will see that mirrors across there. Trouble is that we've got this edge here which I don't like. It's a bit too sharp. So I'm going to create some separation between these, so we can double click the approximation curve and we get this nice edit feature come up. So I can take these lines and push this out. I've also got control of the angle by just moving this slightly, so I can move these into position so I can flare out the bottom if I so desire, and hit escape for that to take. We've now got this surface here. So we've got the two surfaces with space between, so I can create the surface across here. To create the surface across here, I'm going to use something called a blend surface. So we come over to the curves, and what we're going to do is click on one face and we need to click an edge. So that's one selection from one side. Click the other edge and then click the other face and use this tool here to create a surface between two edges, also available from Surfaces Blend Surface. That will bridge that gap with a surface of some continuity. So if I click on it, come to data, you can see the continuity settings there. We're going to do the same on the bottom. So we're going to take this face, control click the edge, and then do the same on the other side. Control click the face and control click the edge. Doesn't matter which way round you select these, as long as you selected a face and an edge, and the same on the other side. And we use the blend surface there as well. We've got no problems inside, as you can see. These are all connected nicely. If we did have problems such as bulging faces that come over the edge, then this will be affected and we'll get creases in here. Because this is parametric, we can change the mirror. So double click the mirror and we can move these in and out if we so desire. So for instance, I'm going to move this way, hit escape, hit Control and R to refresh, and you can see those have moved in together and everything has conformed. So now we need to cap the bottom and the top with a face to actually close this surface. So it can be 3D printed or used in booleans and unions over in the part workbench. For that we will use the part workbench and use something called the advanced utility to create shapes. This is also known as the shape builder. So if we come up to part, got shape builder here. Got a number of options on the left hand side, and we're going to create faces from edges. Click faces from edges, click each of the edges. Now when you're selecting these, I'm just going to hit close, just going to make sure that if we come into our approximation curve, and the actual approximation curve is inside the mirror, come into the Suite 2 rails and get to the ruled surface, we've got these freehand B-splines that are still visible. We don't want to select those when we're actually creating our face. It may cause us problems, it may cause us gapping, therefore we won't be able to close the surface. Now let's come to the advanced utility to create a shape and select the face from edges, control click the edges and hit create. So that's our face created, that's one done. Let's come over to the other side and do the same. Hit create, and we've capped both those ends. Now, word of warning, these faces aren't parametric, so if we do change this, we're going to add that face again, otherwise we won't be able to close this and these faces will be out. Let's hit close. Now we come over to the Curves Workbench. There is a number of ways of closing this face and creating a solid body, but in the Curves Workbench there is a tool here which will give us a nice representation if it's closed or not, and that's the make a parametric solid. We select all the faces, including the blend surface, the sweep approximate NURBS and the end caps and use this tool, what will happen is that if we go down to the bottom, we've got a green solid that's appeared, and you see the shape. Open this up, shape status is solid. If this shape was brown, then it will be a shell, it's not closed. I can actually hide all these now, and you'll see that we've now got this solid here. So we create a solid from those sweep across two rails and the end caps and the blend curve. We can use this solid over in the part workbench. And if I add a cylinder, just to show that it is a solid, right click, transform, and just place it within. We can take our solid, control click the cylinder, and use make a cut, and you can see that's cut through, and inside it is solid. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.